Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 1, Chapter 18, Lord Aram. So, last week, sinister things happened. Paymaster Stenstrom ventured into the bowels of the ship to the docking ring to check out Innocent Drury, make sure he's still there, and make sure he's good and dead by shooting him with his infallible, all-killing ints, and then chucking him out an airlock. A fate most certainly deserved by this scabrous guy. After seeing his brothers, Chance and Lemuel, floating about nice as you please without a spacesuit, all bets are off. And even though Private Tara had put a full 50 caliber auto burst into him, if they can survive being out in space, he can survive that. So he was going to go there, plug him with his ints, which nothing can survive, and then throw him out. He's there, he shoots him, but then the lights go out, and he hears a clank. And Tara says over the comm that the Westminster has gone offline, and that's that. He loses communication. So he's stuck down there all by himself. He has a moment or two of extreme weakness where he doesn't quite know what to do. He has to get himself together, but he does, and ventures into the back of the ship to locate the Westminster and bring it back online and deal with whatever sort of preternatural creature Innocent Drury happens to be. On the way, entering a lift shaft, he sees Innocent has apparently left him a grisly present, a nasty, fleshy, like spidery web of barbed wire. That's what it looked like to Stenstrom. He decided to go around or go to another lift shaft, but then the ship is rocked with a massive explosion, and into the open air of the lift shaft he goes, down to the waiting barbed wire below. And then we switch gears to the chaos aboard the Demophalon John, as Morgan Jederick's Lady of Thompson adroitly pointed out. They flew into Cronin World, and apparently a very watery world, as they appeared to be underwater. They hit an ocean of some sort, and in that ocean are swimming some apparently gigantic creatures, which Lieutenant Gwendolyn caught a quick glimpse of. She saw some red eyes in a dark shape peering in through the windows on the bridge. The ship is a mess. Most of her bridge crew are down and out. Some are dead. Some need attending, which Morgan Jederick started to do. Morgan and Gwen start to argue about whose fault this situation is. And then Gwen gets a comm, and she goes to answer it, and Morgan's looking at her like, who are you talking to? You're not even at the comm. The comm's over there. You're just kind of standing in space with your arms out. Gwen takes the comm, and she hears the creepy voice of her hated aunt, the one that she was afraid of as a little girl, chiding her, telling her to kill Paymaster Stenstrom. And that's where we ended on that pleasant note, as a dream or a nightmare of illusion begins to descend upon Gwen and her crew. This week, Part 1, Chapter 18, we're going to not step back a bit, but we're going to step back and do a little discovery mode of Lord Aram. Everybody's favorite common Joe here, Lord Aram. He's not a rich guy. He's just like you and me. And he has the same dreams and wants and sensibilities. And we'll see how he came to be, and how his constant need to gain acceptance from the sisters is what has driven him throughout his life, as well as his brother's ill treatment of him. And we're going to take a look at that. This chapter right here, Part 1, Chapter 18, Lord Aram. We're going to find out also why he has such an odd name. Has it ever struck you that Aram is a weird name to have? And it is. I'm kind of used to it by now. But there's a reason for it, and we're going to just find out what it is. So let's proceed immediately. Part 1, Chapter 18, Lord Aram. We should never have let him go alone, Tara said, holding the nth. She cocked it and fired. Nothing happened. Girls couldn't fire an nth, Bell had said, and guess he was right. Everything had been working wonderfully. Using the remaining charge on the missives panel, Tara had managed to get a few shipboard systems hammered out. The ship was moving reasonably well under power from the Westminster. Aram had gotten a fair amount of distance between themselves and the pirate ship Head on the Hearth. He was going to line it up, build up some speed, and slap it into bits. That grungy Weber out there would never stand against an armored behemoth like the Seeker. Stenstrom called up from the docking ring. The body of Innocent Drury was still there, which was good news. And then the Westminster vanished off the grid, pop, like it had never been there at all. It was like somebody pulled the plug, and the ship went dark again. The bridge was still lit up, the stolen generators providing power. Aram stood behind the helm. It barely turned. Tara fiddled around with the comm, trying to get it started again. All of the sensing and scanning equipment was dead. Aram cursed. Tara, I need you to go into Bell's office and point out the position of the Head on the Hearth. I have no idea where it is. My screen is dead here. Tara ran into the office. Why, I don't see it. Well, it's got to be out there. It can't have gone far. I had it all lined up. I think it might be to our left. Go that way. Aram pulled on the wheel, and the Seeker banked steeply to the left. Hey, there it is, to our left. It's turning. Aram, it's firing. A series of hard shocks rocked the Seeker. Aram hung on to the helm. What in creation was that? It was an energy beam of some sort. It looks like a hot Cassegrain. On a Weber, they've got a movable, long barrel cannon mounted under the ship's nose, and that's what they're hitting us with. Tara's voice was panicked. Aram, they're coming around again for another pass. Where? 7:30 p.m. Aram tugged on the helm with all his might, feeling the ship protest. Do we have any weapons at all? Take a guess, Aram. The Seeker was rocked again. Aram, the dorsal quarter rear section is starting to glow. Her voice became a shriek. Watch the tentacles! Watch the tentacles! It's trying to grab us! Tara, all we've got is partial maneuvering thrusters. What am I supposed to do? He pulled on the helm and tried to present the other side of the ship to the head, giving the heated up quarter of the hull time to cool and create some space. The helm fought him. He pulled harder. Of all the great men who had once turned this wheel, in its time of greatest need, a tiny man from Calvert would turn its pegs. He would not be meek, and he would not be denied. Aram bent the helm to his will. Tara watched the head's movements. Aram, I think he's going for the Westminster. He's heading for a shot in that direction, high noon. Aram cursed and kicked the bars and pulled on the wheel with all his might, forcing it to turn, forcing the ship to respond. He spun the nose around, trying to get the Westminster as far away from the head as possible. Another rumble from outside. Hit again. Where'd he get us, Tara? Aram shouted. Rear quarter, ventral. Good, Aram thought. The armor's thickest there. The Seeker shuddered. They're hitting us long, Aram, Tara cried. They're pouring it on. Fine. Let them, Tara. Do we have any locomotion at all? She thought a moment. No, not without the Westminster, no. Aram spun the helm as the head came about and blasted them again, its Cassegrain lighting up cherry red. Aram, watch out! Aram! Adjutant Lieutenant Josephus, Lord of Aram, lived in the flower-potted, balconied fleet apartment south of the main complex yard, just a block or two from the weedy growth of the great Armenelos forest. The forest surrounded the city and was constantly threatening to engulf it. His apartment was small but well-appointed and decorated in a sunny fashion. He'd done it himself. Lord Aram having a love of bright color and texture. He had tried his hand at various artistic pursuits, painting, sculpting, and so forth, but his skill was limited. Some of the paintings he had finished were colorful enough, but all were rather formless and abstract in nature. He was well liked and had his fair share of friends, but they were mostly working peers, other adjutants, and folks from the mailroom he knew from his doings at the fleet. None of them were people he roamed about with when not at work. He was considered cute, that adorable tiny fellow working for the unsmiling and dreaded Admiral Derleth, his faithful little shadow. He came from a house miner in Calvert. His father was Joshua, and his mother, Dom Rehan. He was the youngest and smallest of all his brothers and sisters. Coming from a Calvert house, the Arams didn't live in a huge manor or stately villa. Instead, they lived in a serviceable townhouse in the heart of St. Edmunds, a few blocks from the dock, on St. James Road, with a smashing view of Lonely Hearts Point. Aram had no complaints. He had had a good life. His father was a fisherman, owning a few boats berthed into St. Edmunds docks that normally brought in enough money to keep the family living fairly well. The house of Aram was originally a house from the eastern city of Dee, hailing from the old house of Aram Terwilliger, but when the sisters announced they were going to destroy the city of Dee for decadence and vice, the house broke apart. The house of Twill and Atlinger moving north to the new city of Dee, while the house of Aram went southwest and resettled in St. Edmunds. The Arams thought it best to get back into the sisters' good graces as soon as possible, and avoiding Dee altogether would be wise. They took the name Aram, but when they submitted their patent to the sisters at Valenhelm, they miscopied it, coming up with a legal name of Aram, which the sisters refused to correct afterwards. Such would be their usual treatment from the sisters, miscopied, mishandled, and unsatisfied. The Arams would have an occasional and rather sordid history with the sisters through the years, with each event lessening them ever more in the esteemed sex eyes. All houses wanted the sisters to approve of them, and the Arams were no different. Clovis of Aram had become a noted chef at the Empire Hotel in St. Edmunds. However, when a sister came to sample his latest dish, a bad piece of halibut made her dreadfully sick, bending her over to full-blown food poisoning, complete with carpet kneeling and projectile vomiting right there in the dining room floor. That incident, however, paled in comparison to the Brant Ball affair years later, when Lord Arley of Aram, the charger of the Beasley Canning Brant Ball team, put a sister from Saga Convent into the wall, and subsequently into traction while attempting to make a rough play. Such things the sisters tend not to forget, and so the House of Aram fell off the sisters' programmability schedule entirely and became untouchable. When one poisons a sister, when one injures her playing Brant Ball, one can bet they won't want to have programmability anytime soon. Untouchable. Ventinome. Aram. Everybody helped out with the family trade, his mother and his siblings included. His brothers went out with father every day to harvest the catch. His mother and sisters waited to help unload and process the fish when they returned. When Josephus grew old enough to accompany his father out to sea, he was miserable. Not only was his eyesight appalling, he was a grand klutz as well, making a mess on the boat, tangling nets and losing catches. He was also chronically seasick, and that was something he never got over. Eventually, father, shaking his head, relegated him back to the shore where he helped out with the women. His older brother Ethelrud tormented him relentlessly on the matter. Helping mother, though, was no small chore. She kept everything regimented and precise, Possibly that's where he learned to keep a clear, uncluttered head and work in a logical fashion from his mother's teachings. As he grew, he learned that salt-sprayed and sunny Calvert was considered a lowly place, the least of places on Cana, unlike the stately lands to the north and the west, and the mountainous regions far to the north, where he heard godlike people with blue hair lived. What was wrong with Calvert? The weather was warm and the people were good, not overly rich or fashionable, but cheery and neighborly nonetheless. People helped each other in Calvert, would go out of their way for each other. As Josephus developed into a small, slope-shouldered boy with ridiculous glasses and bright blonde hair, he and some of his brothers and sisters often walked home from school, moving through the alleys and crooked streets among strangers, but having no fear. I didn't think twice about it. Calvert was a good place. Then there came word of strange doings, of murders, people turning up dead. The wharves and seasides began buzzing of a fiend who was committing the murders. The fiend of Calvert. People began looking at each other twice. Strangers became untrusting. The fiend not only killed men in the streets, he killed a little bit of the spirit of Calvert too. Josephus was terrified of the fiend. Who was doing this? Who could do such a thing? His brother loved to torment him. "It's me, Joe, you little fishmonger. I'm the fiend. And you're next." In an attempt to protect him and his school-age brothers and sisters, Aram was sent off to day school in D, where the fiend so far hadn't shown, coming home only on the weekends. Josephus was a fine student and was generally at or near the top of his classes on a consistent basis. The top students of the schools were often invited to have lunch with a faction of important ladies known as the Sisterhood of Light. It was an honor, he was told. The sisters were wise and influential, and currying their favor was the key to success in the league. Sitting at the large table, he was in awe of these tall, skinny ladies dressed all in white, each with a huge cranked headdress shaped like the wing of an airplane. The sisters never spoke, but their presence spoke volumes, and their gaze could stop you in your tracks. Many of the students sitting at lunch were selected to read essays and poems they had written to the sisters. Josephus wanted to read something to them as well, and he was determined to sharpen his writing skills so that he too might one day have the honor. He wrote a short poem about summer that delighted his teachers, and he got his wish. He was selected to stand, approach, and read to the sisters at lunch. He stood there with his paper and stepped forward, his ugly black glasses trembling on his face. The sisters' presence was piercing. They sat with perfect posture, their arms wrapped up in thin strips of white cloth, like bandages beneath their loose robes, and their delicate hands holding their soup spoons. They sat there looking at him with inscrutable eyes, the wings of their headdresses bobbing slightly, and Josephus choked up. He couldn't summon the courage to read his poem. After a while, and humiliated before his snickering classmates, he returned to his seat, devastated. When school let out for the summer, he returned home. The fiend was still on the prowl, and his parents kept a close eye on him. He told his mother of his shame before the sisters. His mother told him it was probably just as well. The sisters didn't favor Calverts much. They preferred the Remnaths and Xenons, and their favorites, the Vith, with their godlike abilities and their blue hair. She also mentioned something about the sisters' program, and that they rarely considered the house of Aram worthy. His brother, Ethelrude, liked to tell his friends that he'd had programmability with a sister, and that she'd fallen in love with him in the process. He received occasional notices from the sisters. Ethelrude said it was correspondence from his sister admirer. Josephus managed to get a quick glimpse of one of the notices once. It was a warning from the sisters and a fine for lying to the people regarding programmability. Josephus didn't understand what his mother meant about the sisters' program and all, and his brother often told lies, so that wasn't a surprise. He simply knew that he'd lost something special when he couldn't read his poem to the sisters. How he had wished he had had the courage to read it to them. Maybe they would have liked it. That summer, his mother kept him close to the dock so she could watch him, what with the fiend running amok as never before. He found himself bored, waiting there on the docks for his father's boats to return. One day, while poking about in the shed his family owned, he found something hidden under a tarp. Pulling the tarp aside, he discovered a small, open-aired vehicle of some kind, barely big enough to seat 4 people. It reminded him of a mechanical dolphin. It was a faded blue with seats and a dash full of control mechanisms. He ran out onto the dock, found his mother, and demanded to know what it was. She told him it was an old suborbital, an airship that hadn't worked in years. Apparently, his older brother had messed it up somehow, and nobody ever bothered fixing it. The Arams weren't air people. They were sea people. But Josephus was fascinated. He spent the rest of the summer working with it every day before the boats came in. He studied up, discovered the ship was a Merc 22 suborbital, built by a now defunct manufacturer in Xenon. In the greater scheme of suborbital classification, the Merc 22 was a Class 4. It was just a toy, small and underpowered. It was a starter vehicle, not rated to go very high or very fast. Taking apart much of its rusty innards, he soon had a pile of parts laying about the shed and no idea where he'd gotten them from or how to put them back into place. His brother Ethelrude made a big deal about it, saying he had been planning to fix the craft next week, but now Josephus had ruined it beyond hope of repair. Great going, dweeb. For his 16th birthday, his parents gave Aram a powerful gift, the Molly, the Los Capricos weapon of his family, delivered in a plain box, complete with a certificate from the Sisterhood of Light. They told him that the Molly could do wondrous things. It could allow one to do things one might not ordinarily be able to do, and to know things one shouldn't know. His father apparently used the Molly to help him steer his boats to where the fish were, and his mother admitted she used it to know exactly what sorts of fish he had caught and how best to prepare for his return. His brother swore the fabled powers of the Molly were nothing but a hoax, for he tried to use it for all sorts of grand things, but never got anywhere with it. Josephus didn't listen to his brother, as he was in awe. Here it was, the Molly. It looked like a golden charm in the shape of a fish, and apparently, despite his brother's protests, it could work minor miracles. The Molly was rumored to have come from a captured chest of cursed Zaffin treasure, won from a sunken ship during the Battle of Sorander Quo. The sisters took the chest and, not certain what to make of it, smelted the pieces into various trinkets and distributed them to a number of house miners of low repute for, quote, testing purposes, unquote. The Arams being one of them. His parents, though, were full of warnings. They said the Molly came with a cost. You couldn't just use it without first registering with the sisters, and its overuse could imperil his soul. Being a remarkably empirical boy, Josephus decided to test the Molly, to see what it could do. There was an eating contest that was held every year in Calvert Square, a messy affair with blueberry pies. He decided to enter it and use the Molly to see what might happen. There was a pre-generated form his parents had for using the Molly. He filled it out and sent it along to the sisters, wondering what their response would be and how long it would take. He didn't have long to wait. He got back a quick response. The sisters weren't kind in their assessment. In every column they responded with the words negligible and insignificant and of no consequence. Their final assessment, approved, least concern. Though Josephus was just a little boy, he began to understand full well that the sisters, those skinny ladies in headdresses he had so wanted to impress with his poem about the wonders of summer, didn't think much about he or his family. He'd heard of his uncle, the cook, and his other uncle, the brant ball player, and their embarrassing misadventures with the sisters, but those stories meant little to him. Here, in his response from the sisters, was proof of his family's lowly station with them, and that was galling for him. He went out, mollied up, and won the eating contest. All the bigger-bellied older kids scratching their heads, wondering how such a small, skinny lad could put away so much pie. The molly really did appear to work if used properly. With it, he could probably have the Merc 22 fixed in no time. But as the lord of the contest pinned the ribbon on his chest in the sunshine of Calvert Square, the sisters' comments rang through in his mind. Negligible, insignificant, of least concern. He made a momentous decision at that point, especially for a child. He decided he was going to fix the Merc 22 all on his own, and what's more, once he fixed it, he was going to teach himself how to fly it. Again, all by himself, no assistance from the Molly. If he could do such a thing, perhaps the sisters would approve. Working all summer, he gathered as much information as he could from the HoloNet, from the libraries, and from the handymen down the lane. Even though the fiend had everybody worked up, there still remained a good measure of neighborly decency floating around Calvert. The handymen got used to seeing him every day, always with fresh questions. Soon, he had a basic understanding of the simple systems making up the Merc 22. There were the collective systems and the cyclic systems, the superchargers and the gyroscopy governing it all. He had learned about unified thrust, the disk of anti-gravity the ship created, and the harmony of control. Poring over his materials, reverse engineering the craft, he discovered what had happened to put the vehicle out of commission. His brother had damaged the mechanical linkages controlling the canards and flight surfaces, and the two bottle motors mounted in the rear were blown out, apparently from improper use. Ethelrude had, as the handyman put it, flown the Merc 22 out of the envelope, and the result was a dogged-out ship. He figured all this out on his own, no help from the Molly. Josephus saved his money and scoured the nearby junkyards looking for the correct replacement parts. As a birthday gift, his parents bought him 2 replacement bottle motors. Finally, with everything reinstalled and fitted, the Merc 22 was ready to go. A complication occurred when his brother appeared. He discovered all the work Josephus had been doing and laughed at him. No way could that old wreck be fixed, for he had tried himself and couldn't do it. When he found out that the Merc 22 had in fact been fixed, he was elated and calmed his friends that he had fixed the old Merc and was coming to take them out for a spin over the rooftops. Aram was terrified. His brother had been the one who wrecked it in the first place and would probably do it again. All that work was about to be shot to the moons. He ran to the shed just as an unsightly gaggle noisily stepped onto the dock. It was his brother, one of his meathead friends, and a bouncing pair of painted trollops from the cemeteries arriving, fueled by smoking menthols and clinking bottles of cheap spirits. "Oi, Joe! Get away from my ship, you little bug! You'll mess up all my hard work!" his brother cried. "Let's get him!" his friend yelled with glee. "Let's pull his pants down and throw him in the water." Straining with all his might, Josephus pulled the Merc out onto the dock and jumped into the cockpit. He could hear his brother and his friends running fast across the planks of the dock. Bump, 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 bump. "Joe, I'm gonna pull your little wings out, you fly! You worthless bug!" his brother called on the run, throwing an empty bottle of wine at him. He set the controls and tore off down the dock just as his brothers and his crew got there, dodging a hail of thrown bottles and shoes as he climbed into the air. "I'm gonna get you, Joe!" his brother yelled. Flailing about in midair, he struggled with the suborbital like an unruly bronco. He knew from his reading how the controls worked. He knew pulling back on the yoke made it go up and pushing forward caused it to descend. He knew the side stick controlled the collective attitude of the vehicle and the foot pedals made it yaw or slide. After a few minutes and a few close calls, as he'd almost hit the patinaed roof of the Empire Hotel and caused a group of strollers in Calvert Square to scatter, he got the hang of it. After an hour of playing in the clouds, he had mastery of it, soaring over the colorful seaside of Calvert, waving at the people as he passed overhead. Thus began his love of flying and the sky, moving in the direction of the sun, far away from roving fiends, from the ocean that made him sick, from brothers who mocked him, and the sisters who disregarded him. When he was 29, Aram made an appointment to see Lord Gerald Catherbaum, the local Lord Major of St. Edmunds. Though he was a great lord, Gerald Catherbaum was a man about the neighborhood, often seen strolling the docks with his bags of purchases, or sitting in the lobby of the Empire Hotel, laughing and smoking with the comers and goers. He was on a first-name basis with Josephus's mother and father, and he often bought his father's catches at premium prices. Aram's goal was to join the Stellar Fleet. He wanted to become a helmsman. He wanted to fly a great ship, and for that he needed a letter of recommendation. He had high hopes. He could fly. He could soar. All he needed was the chance to prove it. In reviewing Lord Aram's petition, Lord Catherbaum didn't have good news. He sat there behind his desk, hands folded, and quietly laid it out for him. Josephus, you know I think you a fine young lad, and I would happily draft you a letter of recommendation, but let's be reasonable. You wish to be a fleet helmsman. Your eyesight is so poor, and not only that, it's uncorrectable via surgery. You have your opticals there, but I know the lords of the fleet, and they would not look kindly upon that. Even the Marines, He cleared his throat. And additionally, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Sisterhood of Light has long passed a ventinomy upon your house's patent. Aram didn't know what that meant. Lord Catherbaum was pained. It means, my boy, that they think your house is flawed, imperfect, not worth their program. You are, in their eyes, untouchable, and the lords of the fleet would see that and disqualify you because of it. A lot of nonsense, really, but the fleet values the sisters' assessments. Josephus sat there and felt ashamed. I'm sorry, Lord Catherbaum said. Ventinome, flawed, imperfect, untouchable, unwanted. He was devastated. He looked at his hands through his glasses, quietly stood, and left the office. Josephus, wait! Lord Catherbaum said, catching up to him. He put his hands on Aram's tiny shoulders. Wait, but please attend, for I do not wish you to walk out of here thinking that any of this is your fault. I've seen you flying that little ship around, and I'll wager your skill up against anybody's. The sisters and their damn Ventinome. Who are they to place summary judgment on you, on us? They've never given the people of Calvert our due. Never. We are good people, though thought low by the rest of Cana. And even when there's a mad killer in our midst, slaying us at his whim, we can get no help. Just another dead man in Calvert. Who's to bother? Who's to care? Well, I care. And I'm bringing in someone of my own, some fellow from the north who wears a mask, paid out of my own coin. I heard he gets results. And tomorrow, I march with our people on Calvert Square to demand justice. And there will be justice for you as well. Josephus, there is a contest that I know of. Oh, it's just nonsense. But if you win, you shall have an honorary admittance to the fleet. It's not much, but if you win, you shall be in the fleet. And once there, you can make your own way and make them see you for who you are. Having no idea what to make of that, Josephus left Lord Gerald Catherbaum's office and went home. Josephus lay in his bed. In the morning, he would go to D and participate in an essay writing contest that Lord Catherbaum had signed him up for. The winner went the low-level administrative position in the Stellar Fleet. It wasn't much, but assuming he could win the contest, it might lead to better things. It might. He was excited. As he tried to settle his thoughts and get some rest, he heard some sort of commotion outside. His room was on the top level of the family townhouse, and sounds carried up there. It sounded like a struggle, a distant crashing getting steadily nearer. Then he heard a loud toppling sound come from the roof overhead, followed by footsteps. Somebody running across his rooftop, and then the sounds were gone. He would come to know that the footsteps belonged to the Fiend of Calvert, running for his life from the mad Lord of Walther, the man brought to Calvert by Lord Catherbaum. That was the last night the Fiend was heard of in Calvert. That was also the last night of Josephus's old life and home. A new day was soon to dawn, and a new life as well. And with that, we conclude Part 1, Chapter 18, Lord Aram. So there it is. That's the origins, the early life of Lord Aram, his life growing up in Calvert. We see his family came from an old house that was from the city of D, and if you know the League of Elder Lore, you know the city of D was destroyed by the Sisterhood of Light. If you're in a city that's doing decadence, doing vile things, has lots of violence and crime, you can bet the sisters are going to pay a visit and scorch your city from the earth. They give you plenty of warning, like, you don't want to be here tomorrow because we're going to scorch this place, and any who happen to be in it, you are fair warned. Just like a cruise ship. When you get off on the docks and they say, we're leaving at 4 p.m. And if you're late, and that's it. Well, that's what the sisters do. Tomorrow we're scorching this place, and if you're here, it's on you. The old family of Aram Terwilliger left D so they wouldn't get scorched, and then the house broke up. They had a disagreement on what they should do afterwards. It broke into 3 factions. 2 of the factions went north to the new city of D, the one that was rebuilt over the smoking ashes of the old one. And then the house of Aram decided to move to St. Edmunds. And when they turned in their patent to the sisters, they had declared themselves the House of Aram, A-R-A-M. But the sisters did some sort of clerical error, and they copied it down as A-Ram. Aram. And as we know, the sisters don't make mistakes, so the Arams just had to live with it. And we see how his family had a bad history with the sisters. His one uncle poisoned one accidentally. He served her a bad piece of halibut. And then another one, Lord Arley, did a dirty play playing Brant ball, as the sisters love to do, and put her in the wall and into traction. And after that, the sisters were like, okay, fuck this house. They don't get programmability. We don't want programmability with people who poison us and injure us playing Brant ball. Screw them. So they became untouchable. And if you are untouchable with the Sisterhood of Light, you can bet it doesn't matter what your personal skills, any talents you might have, you're going to be consigned to the dregs of League Society. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it has to be. The sisters' opinion of you is important. And if they think you're not worth having programmability with, well, then you're not worth being hired, essentially. So it's tough when you're an untouchable like Aram. And in rebuilding the Merc 22 suborbital he found in the shed that his brother had broke, he grew to have a love of the air as he got seasick, going out to sea with his father. His family was sea people, but he just couldn't handle it. And his brother just tormented him on the subject, says he had to stay back with his mom and his sisters. Not a good thing. But Aram taught himself how to fly. He fixed the Merc. And then his brother, being a general blowhard, it's like, I fixed it, finally. He went to get his creepy friends. He was probably going to break it again. Aram took off with it and taught himself how to fly. and he impressed Lord Gerald Catherbaum, the man about town, walking about the square, seeing this kid in this little slow suborbital, kind of like if a kid comes down the street in a moped. That's basically what it looked like. But Aram was skillful enough after he got the hang of it. He wanted to join the fleet and be a helmsman like Captain Davidge. But lots of things working against him. His eyesight is terrible, as we know. And his untouchable status that's it. There's no way you can join the fleet. That will never take you. But Lord Catherbaum is a good man, and he generally cares about the people of Calvard, of St. Edmunds, and it's like a dad to everybody, sort of. And he's like, well, I know of this stupid writing contest that if you submit an entry and you win, you get a low-level entrance into the fleet, like working in the mailroom or in a cafeteria, something menial like that. But that's your stepping stone into the fleet. You go there, work hard, do a good job, and impress people, and maybe things will happen. And that's what Aram did. And then that night, the night before his writing contest, which obviously, as he was a adjutant working for Admiral Derleth, obviously Aram's going to win that contest. He hears the Fiend of Calvert being pursued by the Mad Lord of Walther. He hears him run over his rooftop. And that's sort of like a metaphor for change, that his old life is over and a new life, one full of possibilities, is beginning. Next week, we continue with Aram's story, Part 1, Chapter 19, An Unusual Errand. And in this chapter, though it's not going to be said or spoken out loud, in this chapter is the reason why Lily, Lady Lily of Gamboa, likes Aram so much. How he affected her in such a profound way that she considers him a brother, that she knows his heart. The reasoning for that is going to happen in chapter 19. Even though it's nothing stated, if you're perceptive, it should be obvious why. But we will find out next week. Part 1, Chapter 19, An Unusual Errand. We will finish up with these Aram chapters and again get back to the dire situation aboard the Seeker. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.